I've been using the Sony A7 IV for nearly 2 years now as my main photo and video camera. And in this video, I want to answer the question, would I still buy this camera in 2024? Let's start off with a brief overview of the A7 IV. The camera body alone costs $3,200 Canadian, although you can sometimes find really good deals on this camera. It has a 33 megapixel full frame sensor. It shoots 4K 10-bit 422 footage up to 60 frames per second, although if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, there's a 1.5x crop. It has a flip out touchscreen, a photo video switch, full-size HDMI port, and dual card slots. This camera is pretty close to what I would consider to be the perfect hybrid camera. One of the reasons why I love this camera so much is the sensor. Most other hybrid cameras in this price range or category, like the Canon R6 for example, have 24 megapixel sensors. The A7 IV having a 33 megapixel sensor means that you have a lot more room to crop your photos. One really awesome use case of these extra megapixels is to get more range out of your lenses. You can actually program a button on your camera to crop mode. So I can take a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, put it in crop mode, and that 100 to 400 basically becomes a 150 to 600, but still at 22 megapixels, which is pretty awesome. You can obviously just take the photo normally in full frame mode, not in crop mode, and then crop the photo after in Lightroom, but I really like to see my compositions in camera while I'm shooting, which leads kind of into the customization and functionality of the camera. If you've ever used a Sony camera before, then you're going to be right at home with this camera, as there are loads of ways that you can customize this camera. You can program pretty much every button on the camera to do something different, whether it be changing your focus mode, your drive type, the white balance, or anything that you would otherwise need to go into the menu system to change, you can program it to a button. What's awesome about having a photo video switch is that you can customize all of your buttons differently for photo and video mode. So in video mode, maybe you want one of your buttons set for zebras, the other one set for gamma display assist, which is what I have on my camera, so I can shoot in a log profile, but still have a normal looking image on my display while I'm shooting. But when you're shooting photos, you don't need zebras and you don't need gamma display assist, so you can change those buttons to be something different when you're shooting photos. Additionally, there are 3 custom modes that you can set for both photo and video. Are there 3? So for me, for video, I have 2 of these set up to be 24 frames per second and 60 frames per second in log with the correct shutter speed, the correct ISO, and all the other settings that I normally use when I'm shooting video. This makes it super easy to just pick up my camera, throw it in video mode, put it into one of my custom modes, and pretty much all I need to do is set the white balance and I could start recording. I don't really use these custom modes for photos. I mainly just shoot in either manual or aperture priority mode, but they are there if you need them. The Sony menu system in the older Sony cameras used to be really weird and difficult to navigate, but in the Sony A7 IV, it has the updated Sony menu system, which is a lot easier to navigate. I have found that there are a couple settings that I've needed to use that aren't intuitively placed within the menu system where I think they would be, but after a couple Google searches, I basically memorized everything that I need to get what I need to get done. When it comes to autofocus on this camera for shooting photos, it's ridiculous how easy it is to just pick up your camera, throw it in continuous autofocus, and get a shot that's in focus. It has animal, human, and bird eye autofocus, which makes it super easy to nail pretty much any shot that you're gonna take. The video autofocus on this camera is also spectacular. Like I said before, I've been using this camera for nearly 2 years, and I shoot all of my videos with this camera, including the one that you're watching right now, and I basically never even have to think about whether or not I'm in focus because the autofocus is just so good. The video quality that comes out of this camera is just amazing. It's why I got this camera in the first place. I came from the Sony A7 II, which was a great photo camera, but when it came to video, it didn't shoot in 4K, the autofocus was lacking, and it wasn't really doing the trick when it came to shooting video. The Sony A7 IV shoots in 4K 24, 25, 30, and even 60 frames per second at a 1.5x crop. The 4K video that comes out of this camera is an oversampled 7K image, so the video quality is very, very high. You also have the ability to shoot in 4K 10-bit 422, which means that you can shoot in S-Log 3. The predecessor to this camera, the Sony A7 III, While technically it was possible to shoot in S-Log3, because you're not shooting in 422, you're shooting in 420, it's not really recommended to shoot in S-Log3. You don't really get the best results, and most people shot in S-Log2 for those reasons. Now, if you don't want to color grade S-Log3 footage, like I said in a previous video, just buy the Phantom LUTs, slap it on your footage, and it'll look amazing. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Now, if we're talking about video quality, we might as well talk about photo quality. I don't really think there's a whole lot to say here when it comes to photos. Pretty much every camera that's come out in the last 10 years, including the predecessor to this camera, the A7III, or even the A7 II, the photos look great. The RAW files that come out of the A7 IV are super easy to work with, and I'm always amazed at how well I can recover even a severely underexposed photo. Alright, let's talk about some of the cons of this camera, and quite honestly, there aren't very many. Probably the biggest con is that when it comes to video, the 4K 60 is in a 1.5x crop. This hasn't really affected me personally that much. I just have to shoot a little bit wider if I'm shooting in 4K 60, but it's just something to consider. Aside from the fact that there's a crop on 4K 60, I can't really think of too many other cons of this camera. Obviously the A7 IV doesn't shoot in 4K 120, but being at this price point, being a hybrid camera, I wouldn't really expect this camera to shoot that anyway. If you're looking to shoot in 4K 120 or you're primarily a video shooter who wants to get some of those more advanced video features, this isn't really the camera that I would recommend anyway. I would look to something like the FX3, the FX30, or the A7S III, one of the more dedicated video cameras that Sony makes. Aside from some of these things, I really do think that this is the perfect hybrid camera. So would I buy this camera now in 2024? Really the question that you need to ask yourself when you're looking at what camera that you need to buy, and this goes for anyone looking to buy a camera, is what is the purpose of the camera? What are you going to use it for? If you're a professional photographer who shoots weddings every single weekend, could you use this camera? Probably. That being said, unless you're just starting out or you're a second shooter, you'd probably be looking at a more photo-focused camera like the A7R5. Similarly, if you're primarily a video shooter, you're a filmmaker, you film weddings, then you're probably going to be looking at a video focused camera like some of the ones that I mentioned before. If you truly want a hybrid camera, maybe you're shooting video stuff for YouTube, for social media, of your kids, whatever it is, and you also want a really great camera for photos, that's where I really think that the A7 IV fills the market. And really there are only a few cameras out right now that I would even consider to fill this need. The Sony A7 IV, the Canon R6, the Sony A7C II, which is basically the A7 IV in a smaller body. Potentially the Sony A6700, although this is a crop sensor camera, not a full frame camera, so you're not really comparing apples to apples. I'm not really going to get into the Lumix cameras because I don't know a lot about them, but I know there are a couple cameras that they have out there that could potentially fill this need as well. Given all of these options, if I had no camera right now and I had to pick one camera, it would still be the Sony A7 IV. Although more and more lately, I have been eyeing up the A7C II because it's just a smaller version of the A7 IV, and lately I've been kind of thinking about downsizing the size of my kit. Anyway, that's an aside, a topic for a different video. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, and you want to keep seeing stuff like this, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out on my next video. I'll see you guys in the next one.